Hello everyone, I am the Man at Kirby, and welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a Rule 0 commander from Mystery Booster 2 as chosen by viewers, Chea, friend to many, too many. Thanks for participating. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel and no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck techs, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with a logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Chea is a 2/4 human wizard for 1 generic, 1 white, 1 black, and 1 green. She has 2 abilities that care about a wacky batch, familiars. These being bats, birds, cats, dragons, fairies, foxes, frogs, imps, lizards, and spiders, as well as creatures with the word familiar in its name. First off, she gives these creatures spells flash, which is great to keep our mana open, but it's going to also be relevant when combining her activated ability along with some synergy that we'll see later on. As for that activated ability, when you tap her, you add X green mana and each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of familiars you control. Suffice it to say, we're going to want to maximize the number of familiars we have in play. To that end, you can build this deck either pure batch or purely typal, dedicating your creatures to any one of these creature subtypes. As for familiars per se, the deck is running Anara Wolved Familiar, Falthus Shadowcat Familiar, Sunscape Familiar, and Thornscape Familiar. These help the deck run more smoothly since the first one gives Chea indestructible during our turn, and the last two reduce the cost of our colored spells, respectively. Falthus is also amazing to flash in since it gives Chea Death Touch for those sneaky blocks. However, in order to capitalize more on her second ability, I decided to go quantity over quality, especially since it generates a ton of mana plus can kill off the entire table. In order to maximize this ability, the deck is running plenty of mass token creating effects. Some of these, such as Ancient Gold Dragon, Arasa of the Endless Web, Ocelot Pride, Twitching Doll, and Nesting Dovehawk, have the added bonus of also being considered familiars thanks to Chea. The dragon is insane here, being able to create a D20 amount of flying fairies whenever it deals combat damage. It does cost a whopping 7 mana, but it's a 7/10 flyer, and our commander is an epic mana source anyways. Arasa is great at creating spider tokens for free whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery. This will trigger a ton on a 4-player commander game. The Ocelot is a bit pricey on the secondary market due to its modern deck, but if you can get one, it's busted here. It's a 1/1 for 1 mana with First Strike, Lifelink, and Ascend, which will give us the City's Blessing more often than not for being a tokens deck. Speaking of, it creates cats at the end of the turn if we gain life. Then it creates a token copy for each token that entered the battlefield that turn. Absolute insanity. And this isn't even the only token multiplying or token copying effect in the deck. We'll see the rest of them soon enough. The doll is a spider mana rock that gets counters each time you use it. While the deck isn't going to be short on mana anytime soon, you can then sacrifice it to create a spider for each counter on it. So good. The Dovehawk doesn't create tokens per se, but it does populate at the beginning of our combat step. Not only that, but it gets massive each time a token enters the battlefield. Populate is pretty useful here, which is why Full Flowering, Celestia Eulogist, and Sundering Growth are also included. The Eulogist isn't a familiar, but that's okay because it's an amazing mana sink for Chea. Not only are we screwing over graveyard decks, but we're also populating as well. Speaking of mana sinks, Full Flowering is busted when we sink a ton of mana into it. This can help us create an overwhelming board state that, even if we can't swing out and kill the table in an Alpha Strike, we should have a crazy amount of familiars for when we next activate Chea. Sundering Growth is amazing because it also serves as interaction. Don't worry, the deck is still running generic interaction like Beast Within, Generous Gift, Stroke of Midnight, Vindicate, Anguish Unmaking, and Casualties of War. The deck isn't running board wipes of its own because it's heavily reliant on its creatures. That being said, since we're more than likely going to have the biggest army at the table, we're more worried about opposing board wipes. To that end, the deck is running Flawless Maneuver, Heroic Intervention, Rapid Vigor, Golgari Charm, Teferi's Protection, Clever Concealment, and Guardian of Faith as obvious ways to protect our board. Most board wipes don't have the Can't Regenerate clause, so mass regenerate effects like Rapid Vigor and Golgari Charm are amazing here. As for non-destroying mass removal, you can't go wrong with mass phasing effects. But returning to the token creating effects, Arachnogenesis, Bitter Blossom, Emeria Angel, Philodar Retreat, Murmuration, Waiting in the Weeds, and White Sun Zenith aren't familiars, but that's fine since they have the potential of creating tons of familiars at once or a steady stream of reliable familiar tokens as the game progresses. Of these, White Sun Zenith is possibly the best one since it's an instant and an amazing mana sink for Chea. If you already have a ton of familiars, this spell can potentially double how many you'll have for the next time you activate her. Waiting in the weeds is symmetrical, but that doesn't matter. In fact, I'm running Yavimaya Cradle of Growth to make the absolute most of it. Yes, it also helps out opponents if we have Yamavaya in play, but giving them 1/1 cats is nothing compared to us tapping Chea down for a ton of green mana as well as global life loss. Loth, Spider Queen, and Black Market connections also create familiar tokens but are more useful than just that. Both of these also provide card advantage, which is important for any deck. Loth also has a useful emblem for a weenie token deck like this one. If we manage to only get through with a single 1/1, that player will lose 7 life in order to have lost the total of 8. It's not a massive upgrade, but it definitely adds up. Purge Protection also creates familiar tokens, but more importantly is another mass phase out effect like the previously mentioned ones, particularly Teferi's Protection. Now, even if we gift an opponent an extra turn, we can give it to the player most behind, or any opponent for that matter, since we're essentially phased out of the game until our next turn. However, since Trouble in Pairs is also in the deck, that extra turn won't matter. Interestingly, if we control Trouble in Pairs when we gift the extra turn, the opponent will skip that extra turn and we still get the Teferi's Protection effect. So good. If that wasn't all, that's just a bonus since the purpose of this enchantment is to draw a ton of cards too. But we'll see the rest of the deck's card advantage effects later on. Returning to token creation, the deck is running Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, Primal Vigor, Anointed Procession, Mandrak, Glory Dominus, and Ohertak, Deepest Foundation. Granted, these don't create tokens per se, but when we are creating them, we'll be creating them in multiples. These are standard in token decks like this one, so I won't linger too long here. As for how else we'll be making the most of Chea's ability, she has the unfortunate situation of requiring tapping to activate. Fortunately, there are plenty of cards in these colors to solve that problem. To that end, the deck is running Instill Energy, Nature's Chosen, Sting the Glinting Dagger, Sword of the Power Runes, Drum Bellower, and Seedworm Muse. The auras are essentially functional reprints, and while they can only be activated once a turn, that's fine since it'll still give us a double Chea activation that turn. Possibly more if both are attached to her. Sting is also essentially once per turn since it untaps her each combat, allowing us to activate her in opponents' turns as well. Same with Drum Bellower and Seedworm Muse, although these will untap all of our creatures each untap step, with the Muse obviously being the best one since it untaps all of our permanents. Sword of the Power Runes is the absolute best one of these though, and is essentially an infinite combo with Chea, so long as we control at least 3 familiars. If we do, we can tap her for 3 green mana, which is enough to untap her. Since each opponent will also lose 3 life each time, we win the game. Even if we don't kill off the table quickly enough with activating Chea multiple times throughout a single turn around the table, that's fine because she's still also generating a ton of mana. Death to the Deathless and Exsanguinate are included, not only as amazing mana sinks, but ways to finish off any opponent that survives. Even if these don't close out the game, we drain the table for so much life that we should be well ahead of any survivors in terms of life and basically guarantee the win later on. If the deck seems too reliant on Chea for the win, not that much. Granted, it revolves around her, but we are also creating a ton of tokens without her, so we'll still have a good board presence as well as a potential aggro victory. That being said, Swiftfoot Boots and Champion's Helm are the only other protective effects for Chea, since it's a green deck and she's relatively cheap to cast the first time, so you can realistically cast her multiple times in a game. I avoided any Shroud sources since we want to be able to enchant her with the auras as well as equip her with the untapping swords. That being said, you can still include things like Lightning Greaves if you wanted to, since Drum Bellower and Seedworm Muse will still untap her each untap step. With the deck's mana acceleration package of Soul Ring, Farseek, Nature's Lore, 3 Visits into the North, and Rampant Growth, it's also easy to either recast her multiple times or just use the mana for our other spells. Her being a massive mana accelerate is obviously a huge bonus, but she's not super necessary to push the deck along. In fact, we're using her ability more for the global life loss than the massive mana burst. Last but not least, all the creatures being created means the potential of using them to draw into a ton of cards apart from overwhelming opponents. The deck is running Camaraderie, Collective Unconscious, and Shamanic Revelation. These are amazing card advantage spells once we have a board full of creatures. Even if we only have an equitable amount per mana value, we're still getting an amazing deal. Oran Frostfang, Tadius Juniper Ascendant, and Toski Bearer of Secrets also have the potential of drawing us a ton of cards, especially the first and last one since they don't care about the amount of opponents being hit, rather the amount of creatures doing the hitting. That being said, being able to draw tons of cards each combat step is nothing to scoff at. As a bonus, the Frostfang allows our lowly 1/1s to trade when blocked. Reliquary Tower is included due to how much the deck draws cards. This one is fine on its own since it's a 3-colored deck, but the deck is running Yavimaya, so it does have the potential of tapping for green. The rest of the deck is just the rest of the lands. Apart from all the previously mentioned lands, the deck's running all 9 fetch lands, all 3 opponent lands, all 3 shock lands, all 3 snow duels, all 3 surveil duels, Indatha Triumph, Command Tower, and Ancient Tomb, as well as 3 of each snow-covered basic land for the basic land ramp effects and Into the North. As with all of my deck techs, you can build your mana base according to your budget. Whether you include more expensive cards or even cheaper cards is up to you. You do you. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Chea friend to maybe too many. Yes, this is a Moose 3 booster playtest card. No, it is not legal to play with in Commander. However, it's tame enough and black border possible enough that your playgroup could potentially allow you to rule 0 it for a game or two, especially since there are way more commanders that are way worse to play against. If you're interested in the decklist of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TGG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members. Your membership is greatly appreciated. I also want to thank everyone who voted on this episode. Thanks for participating. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Meta Kirby, and happy brewing.